Hi, everybody, and welcome to the final episode of the Wearing Pants Again podcast. I'm so excited to be recording this season finale. The timing of recording this last episode and releasing it worked out well because it's the end of the year, wrapping up 2025, and it's a great time to reflect on everything. I started this podcast in July of this year. And it really was at its heart, this podcast was a personal project for me. It was a way for me to accomplish a few goals of mine. My hope while doing that was also that if any of my interviews or anything that I had to share could provide value to somebody else, then that is wonderful. But given that, I wanted to kind of do a reflection on just what I've learned through doing this podcast because it really has been a project of self-reflection, and I feel like I've had a lot of growth in these last 6 months. I sort of just dove right into doing this podcast when I started it in July. And then going into August, I was doing a lot of interviews and I was really gung ho about it. In a lot of ways, though, I was confronting many fears that I had had, a lot of anxiety, especially around putting myself out there. And I had been kind of struggling with this whole idea of feeling creatively blocked, which was a large part of the inspiration behind the theme of this podcast, Wearing Pants Again. So I guess I'll kind of touch on my journey starting this podcast and then I'm going to just go through. I have a list of notes of just my takeaways from doing this podcast that I think or I hope can provide value to, if even just one person who's listening, then that's awesome. I guess I will go back to July of this year when I decided to finally start this podcast. I had been feeling creatively blocked for honestly several years at that point. But I think when I say creatively blocked, what I mean is that I was getting in my own way of expressing myself and putting myself out there when it came to things like my photography or music or just any of these creative hobbies that I have. I wasn't allowing myself to do them. I had this fear of, yeah, what people would think, being judged negatively by people. I was going through my old journals that I had kept, and back in May of 2024, I had written down that I wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to have my own podcast. And my idea behind wanting to do that was it was honestly just wanting a way to connect with people because connection is something that I really value. And for a while, I thought, can I even have a podcast about that? And so then we get to July of this year. I was at a point where I was feeling a little bit alone. And so I said, okay, I've been wanting to do this. I'm going to do it. And I was talking to my brother about the idea for my podcast, and I said, I want to, I want to have a way to connect with people. And my brother Evan, who he was my first guest on the podcast, he told me that I should refine the idea more because it was kind of broad. And I think that was helpful advice because then I said, well, I'm very passionate also about creativity, and this is something that I have been sort of struggling with is this idea of allowing myself to have creative outlets. And so I decided to make the theme of my podcast, or I would interview creative people, artists, and storytellers, and people who also just played um, a role in my own journey. I decided that I would have them on the podcast, and interview them about their experience and their lessons and what they learned. So, again, I had this idea and I came up with the name Wearing Pants Again, which was inspired by a song, but I just felt like it made sense. This whole idea of going back out into the world, putting yourself out there. I've had social anxiety for much of my life. And so I think even when it came to posting on social media, it would just cause me a lot of anxiety. So the whole idea of putting it out there that I'm going to start a podcast and it's 2025 and there's so many podcasts already out there. Why would anybody even care that I'm doing a podcast? Those are all thoughts that I had. And finally, I had a copy of this book called Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Maybe you've heard of it. I had honestly not even read the whole book, and I'm currently in the process of actually reading through all of it. But the whole idea behind it is vulnerability. And Brene Brown argues that vulnerability it is not weakness. She says that it is actually the foundation of connection, creativity, and meaningful work. It felt like it was a vulnerable thing to put it out there to people that I was struggling with these things, and I was going to just do it anyways. Another thing that she talks about in the book that really resonated with me is this whole idea of perfectionism. Because I think when it came to honestly a lot of things that I was wanting to pursue, I had this idea that it needed to be at a certain level or be of a certain quality in order for me to put it out there. But that was what was keeping me from doing anything. And so perfectionism, that is just a shield. And we use that to protect ourselves from criticism, rejection. And so, yeah, to sum it up, doing this podcast was kind of my way of forcing myself to just push through all of those fears by interviewing another person and taking up an hour of their time. That also forced me to have this accountability to just put my episodes out there and to keep them up. So that was kind of the foundation is that I wanted to be able to be vulnerable and just be myself, even if that came with the risk of people judging me or what have you. One of my lessons that I learned from doing this podcast, do things that are outside of your comfort zone because that is how you grow. I had sort of realized I wanted to overcome my fear of playing guitar and singing in front of people, and I'm still working on it. I've gone to two open mic nights, and on one of my episodes, I said that this was something that I was so afraid of doing. I was so nervous, and I said this in an interview, and I told myself, I said, okay, Lauren, you've been saying this and you just said it on your podcast. So by the time that you put this interview out, I want to be able to say that I have faced this fear of mine. And so I forced myself to go to an open mic night. I was so proud of myself afterwards for doing this thing that I had been holding myself back because I was thinking, you're not ready. I had this idea that I don't even know that until I could do a flawless performance, I shouldn't go to an open mic night. I don't even know. But one of the best things that I learned from forcing myself to do that is I went up there and I did my two songs, and were they perfect? No. To be able to put yourself out there and do something and accept that it's not perfect, but you did it anyways. And by doing that, that is how you grow. That's how you get better. In order to get good at something, you have to be bad at it first. And maybe that seems obvious, but I think if you're If you are somebody that has perfectionist tendencies, that can be really hard to accept. Going into 2026, I think if there's something that you want to do, write that down. And I think it's also helpful to think about how that ties into your values as a person, and then use that to motivate you to do it. One of the other things that I have learned through doing this podcast, it's a continuous thing that I'm working on. I know it's a lot easier said than done, but do not compare yourself to others. Do not worry about metrics, things like likes or followers or views. Social media can be a great tool and a great way to put yourself and put your work out there and to keep in touch with people and to connect with people. But I think at the same time, I can only speak for myself, but I think I've realized that it's important to sometimes take a step back and evaluate how I feel, or make sure that my relationship with social media is such that I am not letting it have power over me. Because I think I was letting it do that for a long time. When I started doing this podcast, at first I thought, oh, at the very beginning, I said, I don't really care to market it. I mean, if people listen, then that's great, but I'm doing it for myself. But then I found myself getting frustrated, or I would see people that had bigger platforms and had way more views and followers, and I would let that bum me out. The number of likes and the number of followers that somebody has, it doesn't determine your worth or your value as a human being. And I think sometimes there's no way to even the impact that you can have, you might not even know. I do believe every single person that you have the power to impact and make a difference in other people's lives and in the world. It can be as simple as like a quick everyday interaction that you have with even a stranger. If you smile at somebody or compliment somebody, you don't know, you may not ever know the impact that you have on that person, maybe years down the road. um, like when I reconnected with my high school band director for one of my podcast episodes, that was actually probably my most personal episode of this whole podcast. But 7 years, it had been 8 years since I graduated high school, and I had him on the podcast. And all those years later, I was thinking back and I thought about how shy little middle school Lauren, I did not believe in myself at all. And I was lucky to have this band director who saw something in me and he believed in me. And that completely changed the trajectory of my high school experience. And I grew so much because of that. I guess for my own personal creativity, want to, I want to be true to myself and to be able to express myself without worrying so much about what people will think, or worrying about the metrics. If you feel a calling to have some sort of creative expression, you owe it to yourself to do that. I really love my interview that I did with Katie White. She said something like, just be yourself and put yourself out there, put your work out there, and there's somebody out there that just wants to connect. And so just kind of get over yourself. Just start, create what you want to create, and that's how you build, that's how you grow, and you never know what that will lead to. To anybody who has listened to the podcast, it means a lot. This has been a really great experience for me. I think it was a really great way for me to close out this second half of the year, I guess. And now I have this little project and I can look back and see how I've grown. And I have really enjoyed doing the interviews. I really enjoy connecting with people. I love interviewing people. I would keep doing it and I would like to, but also doing a podcast, especially when you're doing everything on your own, it's a lot of work. In 2026, one of my goals is to just continue to make room for my hobbies and to allow myself to have this creative expression in my life. And I wish the same for anyone else who has that calling. If anybody listened and made it to the end of this episode, thank you so much. Thank you to anyone who has listened to the podcast. And if you enjoyed it, or if you want to share any thoughts or connect with me, please feel free to reach out. Yeah, I hope everyone has a happy new year. That's all for now, and thank you for listening.